Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to make Bakewell Tart. I had an email from one of my viewers recently asking if I had a recipe for Bakewell Tart, as he'd seen lots of different recipes. And it occurred to me that although I've made this and it's on my blog, I've never actually made a video for it. And the one I made on my blog was back in 2014, I think. So I thought I'd do it again today. Now, Bakewell Tart, as you may know, is a pastry base with an almond Frangipane filling that has some raspberry jam underneath it to make a really lovely tart, basically. You can, in the UK, buy individual ones in the shop, little ones that about the size of a muffin tin, not a muffin. And you can even buy cherry Bakewells, which has an icing on the top and a cherry on the top of the icing. But the more traditional way is the full-size tart that can be divided into portions. And it's different to the original Bakewell pudding from Bakewell in Derbyshire, which is actually more of a puff pastry type of base with a custard filling inside, again with some jam. So I'll go on to the ingredients for this Bakewell tart. And for the pastry, I have 200 grams, which is 1 1/3 cups of plain flour. That's based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup. I have 15 grams, 2 tablespoons of icing sugar. That's just for a little bit of sweetness. I have a pinch of salt. I have the yolks from 2 large eggs. That would be extra large in the USA. Now, if you don't have large eggs, if you only have medium eggs, then use the yolks from medium eggs in the UK. And then I have 100 grams of cold unsalted butter, which I've cut into cubes. That's 7 tablespoons. And for the filling, I have another 100 grams, 7 tablespoons of unsalted butter. This time, though, it's softened to room temperature. I have, excuse me, I have 125 grams of caster sugar, and that works out at half a cup plus 2 tablespoons. I have a pinch of salt, half a teaspoon of almond extract, which you can leave out if you don't have it. I have 3 large eggs, which I have beaten. Now, that would be extra large in the USA. Now, if you don't have large eggs, then use 3 medium eggs and perhaps the white of one of the eggs that you've taken for the yolks here, and that would be about the same. Then I have 150 grams, which is 6 tablespoons of raspberry jam, and I have 150 grams, which is 1 1/2 cups of ground almonds. So we're going to make the pastry first, so the ingredients for the topping, the filling, can go elsewhere. And what I'm going to do first of all is just put my icing sugar and my salt into the flour and give it a little bit of a stir around. That's just to get it combined a little bit. And I'm going to do this in the processor bowl of my immersion blender, but you can make the pastry by hand, simply rubbing the butter into these dry ingredients. You rub it between your fingers, but it's quicker in the immersion blender bowl, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'll put that flour into the bowl and then put the butter in as well. And I always like to try to coat the butter just a little bit with the flour before I start processing it. It's not important, but that's the way I do it. So then I'm going to process this until it looks like fine breadcrumbs. And that looks good. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in most of my egg yolk, which I've beaten, by the way. I'll hold just a little bit back for the time being, and I'm going to pulse this until it begins to clump together. And that's just beginning. So what I'm going to do is add the rest of my egg yolk in. And I want it to clump more now as I pulse it. And if it doesn't clump quite as much as I want, I have just a little drop of water here, which I will maybe put a teaspoon in at a time. But I try not to use the water because if you don't put the water in, the pastry tends to be much tenderer and more crumbly. And I can see that's clumping together now. So I'm going to tip that out into a bowl so that I can squeeze it together in my hand. You can tip it onto the counter, but I find it easier to work in the bowl. Take the blade away. And if I squeeze this between my hand, it should come together into a dough. And that's very good. That's very, very easy. So I'm then going to put that onto some plastic wrap. And I'm going to flatten it into a disc. Like that, and cover it up. And I'm going to chill that in the fridge for 30 minutes. And while it's chilling, I'm going to preheat my oven to 190 degrees Celsius. That's 170 Celsius with a fan, 375 Fahrenheit. And then we'll roll the pastry out and blind bake it before we make the filling. The dough has chilled for 30 minutes and I've put it onto a floured work surface. I'm going to roll it out to the thickness of about 3 millimeters. It needs to be large enough to fill a 23 centimetre 9-inch tart tin on the base and up the sides as well. And so with that rolled out, it's very, very short, so it may crack, but I'm going to try to roll it onto my rolling pin. And if it cracks, I can patch it. I'm going to gently put that into the tart tin and push it down around the sides, and I will patch it where it needs to be patched. That's no problem. And with that in the tart tin, I'm just going to take off the excess. Like that. And I'm going to put that into the fridge now, this tart case, and I'm going to chill it for another 30 minutes. And as that's chilling, I will preheat my oven to the temperature I mentioned earlier, and then I'll come back after 30 minutes and we'll blind bake it. So the pastry has been in the fridge for 30 minutes and my oven is preheated. So what I'm going to do is take a fork and I'm going to prick all over the base. This is to stop the pastry from puffing up as it blind bakes. So with that pricked, I've got some parchment paper here which I've scrunched up, and I'm going to place that into the pastry case, and then I'm going to pour some baking beans over the top. These are ceramic beans, but you can use dried beans or you can use some rice or something like that. But obviously you won't be able to eat the beans or the rice afterwards. But you can save them to use them for the same purpose another time. So with that, the beans in there like that, I'm going to bake that in the oven. And I'm going to bake it for 15 minutes, and then I'm going to take it out, remove the baking beans and the parchment paper, and put it back into the oven and bake it for a further 5 minutes. Then I'll take it out of the oven and allow it to cool down, and once it's cooled down I'll come back and we'll make the filling and we'll bake it again. So the pastry case is now baked. I baked it for 15 minutes, then I took the beans out and the paper and baked it for a further 5 minutes, and it's cooled down now. So we'll go on to make the almond filling before we put the raspberry jam on the base and then fill it with the almond filling. So for that I'm going to put my sugar and my butter into a large bowl. Now again you can do this by hand, of course, creaming the butter and the sugar, but I'm going to do it with my hand mixer. And I want to mix this until it's nice and fluffy. That's nice and fluffy now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my almond extract in and my pinch of salt, and then I'm going to slowly add the egg as I whisk, and I'm going to add it slowly so that it doesn't curdle the mixture. So that's nicely mixed in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the ground almonds in, and I'm just going to fold those until they're all fully combined. And that's good. So obviously it looks grainy because the almonds tend to be grainy, but they're nicely combined. So what I'm going to do now is to take my tart case and I'm going to put my raspberry jam into the base and spread it all over the base. So that's good, and then the final thing to do is to put the almond filling on the top. Now I should say that at this stage I have adjusted the heat of my oven. I've adjusted the temperature to 180 Celsius, that's 160 Celsius with a fan, 350 Fahrenheit. And I'm going to spoon the mixture on to the jam and then level that off as well. So that's fairly level, I think. And then the final thing to do is to put some flaked or shaved almonds on. I may have forgotten that in the ingredients, but I have 25 grams here, which is about 3 tablespoons. And because I didn't have shaved almonds, I've tried to make my own. And you can just sprinkle them on any way you want. Just over the top. And with the almonds just spread over the top like that, I'm going to put that into the oven and I'm going to bake it for between 30 and 35 minutes. It should rise up, and then if you press the centre it should be nice and firm. At that point I'll take it out of the oven and allow it to cool down, and then I'll come back and show you the results. So I baked the Bakewell Tart for 35 minutes and I tested it and it was just about set on top. And I left it for a few more minutes, so more like 40 minutes, and then it was firm to the touch on top, but it was still soft inside. Frangipane is a very soft and moist filling, so you don't want this baked through so that it's rock hard or whatever. It still needs to be nice and moist once it's cooled down. So I took it out of the oven and I allowed it to cool for about 15 minutes. And then I transferred it onto a wire rack, leaving the base underneath it, and allowed it to cool completely. Then I took the base away and I've cut it, and this is what it looks like. So as I said, it's nice and firm on top and it's cooked all the way through, but it's retained its moisture. So I'll have a taste of a piece. It has a lovely flavour. You've got the flavour of the raspberry jam and the buttery pastry, and then the almonds with the extract as well. The texture is nice and moist, as I said. This really is a very good dessert. You can serve it warm or serve it cold and with some ice cream or some cream, or even some custard if you want to. So this is very, very good as a dessert. I hope you've enjoyed the recipe, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there will be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for this recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.